So today in the new series of podcasts that I'm running, I've got Josh Gilbert joining me. Josh is a partner and solicitors at Tozers. He specialises in commercial property, agricultural property, and provides a solution-based approach to his clients. He's here to share his expert insights on how property sellers and buyers can navigate the side of the legal transactions smoothly and try not to cause any delays. So Josh, good to see you.
Yeah, thanks for having me, John.
That's all right, no problem. So we'll kind of cut straight to the chase. We want this to be concise and not just me and you chatting legal rubbish.
I'll do my best.
So first thing and the key thing is, what are the two main legal pitfalls that you see that buyers and sellers come into face in the property transactions?
It's a tough one, John. There's no exhaustive list of pitfalls. There's any number that can come up, and new and novel ones come all the time. But we've discussed lots of times down here in Devon, I hate to say it, but septic tanks come up frustratingly late in the process. And specifically, there are often issues around the title in terms of how that's been set up to deal with a septic tank that's a shared system with lots of users.
And would you say that what I've seen on those is often you've got your barn conversions that have been done. You've got a courtyard of barns, and then they've chucked in a tank in the 90s.
Yeah,
and it's in the middle of the courtyard. No one quite knows who owns what and whose liability is what.
Quite, and it doesn't really matter who owns it or who has responsibilities to repair it, as long as someone does. And it has to be set up, right in terms of the title to make sure that there are obligations to replace at the end of its life. Make sure that obligations to contribute towards the running costs and the replacement costs can be enforced when they need to be. So there's title issues with septic tanks, but also compliance issues in terms of complying with the rather extensive general binding rules. And I know that your approach is one that I share, and we always advocate for a drainage engineer who you trust to come and survey the septic tank system early on in the process, even before a sale, to give a kind of basic report that says what it is. Is it
does it comply?
Properly,
yes, no,
and does it comply with the general? And
one thing that I've
to flush that out.
One thing that I've seen that I saw the other week is a client came in and they said, "Well, we've got our chap that empties it just to have a look and say it's fine."
Yes.
And he'd written on a scrap of A4, the tank's fine and is working okay. And I think what people don't get is that's not a report.
No. I mean, it doesn't need to be the most sophisticated report in the world, but I mean, it does need to state that this is the system and it does comply with general binding rules. And I mean, the big rules that are breached are, does it discharge directly into a water course? Because that's a big no-no now, obviously, in terms of polluting water systems. And is there a drainage field?
Yes.
Properly constructed.
And let's say hypothetically then, so someone gets their drainage report done and the tank doesn't comply. From a legal standpoint, what are their options?
Well, I think if you're not yet at the point of marketing the property or haven't yet achieved a sale, I would make that very explicit in the marketing brochure. If you're in the fortunate position to have enough cash to replace the system ahead of sale and you've got the time to do so, you could upgrade it to a sewage treatment plant, because it's then it can be a selling point.
And we see that in the sales particulars. If you've got a tank that's compliant, one thing for me is you're trying to maximise your right move bullet points. Well, if I can get in there that has got a newly installed septic tank on a rural home, I'm quite happy with that, because it is a selling point, because it's hassle.
It's hassle. These systems last a very long time.
And
actually, you compare it to the costs of having a mains drainage connection. On a year-by-year basis, they probably measure up. In terms of the emptying cost for a sewage treatment plant system, it's probably fairly similar.
Fairly net zero. And so septic tanks, always a fun one. That's number one at the moment. Number two, what would you say is sort of the second thing that you find slows things up?
I mean, it's just one that can be spotted earlier on, is boundaries. I mean, it's a tale as old as time, isn't it, really? But it does come up a lot. And specifically, I'm really thinking of where there's a discrepancy between where the legal boundary lies and where the physical boundary feature is on the ground. And that's problematic. I mean, in the worst case, we've seen this week in my team, but I mean, it can be the case that a seller has effectively built an extension or an outbuilding on land they do not own. And that is obviously problematic. It can be sorted out. It generally is, but it's going to take time. So let's flush that out early on.
And I think as agents, we can do more to help with that. It's making sure you have had, and I think any half decent agent would do this, is you have had oversight of the title before you get to marketing the home.
Yeah.
But as a vendor, my recommendation often is engage your solicitor early. At the point of when you know you're going to sell your home, if you priced it right in the first instance and then put it on the market, it should sell within a month to 6 week window.
Yeah.
So there's no point trying to engage a solicitor once you've already got your buyer and the buyer's wanting to move things forwards. Engage them at the point that you know you're going to sell your home.
Plan to sell.
Yeah.
Don't go into it half-heartedly.
Yeah.
Appoint a solicitor. They're not going to incur lots of costs up front generally, but they will be able to help you navigate the process, to spot issues early on. They'll be able to send you out all the forms and things to complete so that you can line up your ducks and have give yourself the best chance of having a smooth conveyancing process.
I think what I've noticed is when you do that, and us as agents, it's a two-way street of when you've got everything set up and you've got everything in line early doors, it looks to a buyer like you're organised and you're not trying to hide anything of, yes, we've engaged our solicitor and yes, we're going to get you the draft contract within 48 hours of you agreeing the purchase. Of actually, you look proactive. Yeah. You don't look like, oh, there's my septic tank report already.
Yeah.
You look like you're a seller that's organised and your property is ready to be sold, not someone that's just there like, oh, I got to get that out of the cupboard, and then it's 4 weeks and your buyer's found something else that they like a bit more.
I totally agree.
So two legal pitfalls that cause him to go slowly. You got septic tanks, reviewing your title and boundaries. Yeah. So next one that we've got, here we go. This is one that we were talking about just before we came on camera. Why is it important to choose a proactive solicitor?
Well, I think the fundamental point is that we're talking generally about your home and about your most valuable asset.
Indeed.
So you want to entrust that to someone who's going to handle it with great
care.
We also know that the conveyancing process, sadly, the process of moving home is one of the most acutely stressful moments in someone's life. I can't remember the other two, death and divorce.
Yeah.
But it's really sad that moving home has to be up there.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say that as a conveyancer, it's possible to sort of wave a magic wand over all of that and take away. It is going to be a stressful time. But appointing the right conveyancer can make a huge difference. Yeah. I mean, I think particularly if you want to think about appointing a solicitor who's competent to do your particular transaction.
Yeah.
A central London leasehold is a very different prospect to a
Devon Farm.
Devon Farm, for example. And someone who's got the capacity to deal with the transaction at the pace that you want it done. You can have that conversation with the person you appoint and say, look, I mean, a solicitor's never going to be able to guarantee a time frame because it takes more than just themselves to work to that. But they can, I think you'll get a sense of, are they going to be someone who will push this transaction along or not? Or will it just become reduced down to a paper pushing exercise where the conveyancer doesn't really add any value at all to the transaction and needs chasing at every turn? You want someone who's proactive, who's going to spot issues, advise you on them.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's helping you deal with the issues.
Yeah.
Because don't get me wrong, we can all appoint someone that's going to be cheap, but actually the cost of being cheap sometimes is actually going to outweigh the cost that you get for your home. So a good legal solicitor, especially on a seller's perspective, will be able to help argue your case on things.
Yeah.
Let's say something crops up I've seen it before where people have had a survey done and a surveyor, which is their job to pick holes in things, will say this doesn't meet building regulations, for instance. Well, there's multiple options if something doesn't meet building regulations, or actually when it was installed, were those building regulations even relevant to what they are now? Let's say you've got a home that's built in the 1800s, that staircase probably isn't going to meet building regs for modern staircases. Yeah. That's just throwing something out there. But
it is obviously more nuanced a lot of the time, and I think a solicitor can bring real insight into that and cut through a lot of the crap that is thrown your way as a seller.
And I always say that it's, as a buyer and seller, both people want different things. Buyer wants to get it for the cheapest price possible. Seller wants the most money possible. And providing you've got the right team advising you around there, you can mitigate most circumstances to get a deal that you're both happy with. So I think that's the key thing, is that it's, okay, well, appointing a solicitor is someone who's managing your asset, as you said at the start. You wouldn't appoint the cheapest accountant to manage your most valuable investment, would you?
No.
So it's the same premise.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's really sad, but I mean, I've found myself instructed midway through transactions where sadly clients have had to pull out from using previously appointed conveyancers. In both cases, actually, it wasn't so much the slowness, it was the competency to do the transaction. It just got beyond them and too complicated. And, that caused really painful delays for them.
Yeah.
So appointing the right person at the outset is
vital. Indeed.
And as you say, I think from a selling perspective, solicitors can really add value if they're appointed before the sale is agreed.
Especially I'm just thinking of one that I sold a few years back. It was a grade 2 listed farm that hadn't been registered, the land registry, because it had been in the same family for over 100 years. So you've got something like that. That's not an easy thing to deal with.
No.
My in-laws are farmers and they've owned their farm for multiple generations. I know there's stuff in there that probably hasn't been done in the right way, that if you ever came to sell something like that, you're going to need to appoint the right person in really early to make sure that actually this has been completely set up for sale in the first instance.
Did they get it registered, first registered?
They got it, yeah. So what we did is we got it properly mapped out by a mapping surveyor so that we knew what was there was correct with the titles that surrounded it. Okay. Not just, okay, well, this is roughly what I think I own.
Yeah.
And then you can actually sell the correct acreage. That you're not saying it's got an acre because the vendor thought he got 50 acres, whereas actually you haven't got that. You've got like 38. 2 acres is worth a lot of money.
Yeah.
So you can't just go and base it on, it's about 40 acres because it's about 20 grand there. So that's a lot of money that you can't missell. I'm not going to missell it to someone because then I'm going to get sued.
Yeah.
So engaging that right person early. So we got them to get a mapping surveyor out, register the title properly, and then put it on the market. Do it in the right order.
Yeah.
Not, I'm going to chuck it on, get a price, and then work it out after, because you will be a year into your transaction. The land registry aren't going to rush themselves.
No. But of course you can speed the application up on the basis that it's being
sold,
and they're pretty good at doing that, so it can be done within a month.
Yes. So get it set up early. So that's number one. So gone through legal pitfalls and choosing a proactive solicitor. So what key legal mistake do buyers make and how can you help them avoid it? So what do you see buyers often do or think that they can go and do that's problematic? I'm thinking of when people have done things they shouldn't and then getting mortgages. Of people think that because they're offering and they've got a mortgage, that's all based on them still.
Yeah, I mean that's a classic. I mean, if you are buying with a mortgage, then you are beholden to the requirements of your mortgage lender.
Yes.
And there's no getting away from that. Your solicitor is effectively acting for two clients, for yourself and for the lender. And they must satisfy all of the lender's very exacting requirement
and ever changing
to proceed, and ever changing. Every lender is slightly different, and there will be points that they may have to report to the lender on. The lender will have to go and check with the valuer about before giving clearance to proceed.
Going back to septic tanks, that's one especially, isn't it? I see it a lot when people will say, I don't mind if I've got a tank that's not compliant. I'll tell them and say, look, well, you need to speak to your lender first. They'll say, oh, no, it's fine. I don't mind.
Yeah.
I'll take a view on it. Well, if you're a cash buyer, that's okay. You can take a view on that.
I mean, it's interesting that reporting septic tank non-compliance to lenders. I mean, I think we would take a more nuanced approach depending on the extent of the non-compliance. I mean, if all that's going to be required is a new and replacement system or an upgrade, then have those costs been factored into the price that is being paid? I think that's the crucial question. So it may well not need to be reported to a mortgage lender, but it's each case on its own terms, really. So I mean, other things that a buyer, other mistakes that we see buyers make, I think it's just in terms of the timing of the steps that they need to do. So, I mean, you'll talk to them about getting a surveyor to come around and have a look at the property. I think quite often we see buyers who don't instruct a surveyor and then do later down the tracks, and that can really delay things. I think getting the right surveyor, doing the right kind of survey at the right time, i.e. as early in the process as possible, is really key.
I also think with the survey aspect, I try and get my buyers, if you're making an offer and it's subject to survey, well, let's have the survey within a month of the offer being accepted. Because if you do it, let's say you get your survey done and you're 3 months into the legal conveyance, you've racked up a lot of legal bills as well.
Yes. Yeah.
So most sales I see that fall through are as a result of a survey.
Yeah. That
there's something that's cropped up that they hadn't accounted for, maybe haven't got the cash to deal with or don't want to deal with. That's fine that you don't want to do that. We can all get our heads around it.
But let's get that information to hand
early doors.
And I mean, it can take up to a month or even more to get a good surveyor.
Yes. I'd say if you're going to find someone that will do it within a week, I'd question kind of, are they that great? They might well be, but most of the surveyors I tend to sort of stick, I recommend sort of 3 or 4 that I know that are good. They're about a month to 6 weeks is their booking time, but get it booked in. Get it booked in. And again, as you say, it's making sure you get the right, there's 3 levels of survey, isn't there? And in another episode, I'm meeting a surveyor, Aaron McCluskey, and there's 3 levels of survey, but a good surveyor won't go and do the wrong survey at a property of, let's say, property that we both know, I won't name it, but a property that we dealt with together last year. You wouldn't go and get a £500 home buyer's report on that farmhouse, would you?
No.
You need it to be something that's quite extensive. You almost want, let's say you've got something that's over 2,500 square foot, a big property. You want your survey to almost be a Bible to your home, of that it's not just an investment in your purchase, it's an investment in your running for 12 years afterwards. So actually, I know my flat roof out the back, it's got a 20-year lifespan. It's already had 15. I need to go and do that in 15 years.
What I was brewing? I mean, I moved to my house sort of the peak of the Devon property market, silly season, and we said, we won't have a survey done as sort of a selling point, I suppose, of in terms of our offer. I wish we'd had a survey done purely for information purposes at that point, just because it would have been so useful to have that to refer back to at the time. So,
it's, I think they're worth their weight in gold when you buy them, because you don't know when you'll sell. I went to go and see a lovely couple earlier on this week, and they bought in Exeter in 2020. Lovely house. They've used their survey as their list of jobs to do for this 5 years. And they said, we're going to go back through our survey before we put it to the market, because we're going to make sure that we ticked off the big ticket items. Yes. They were like, we're thinking about putting a new kitchen in before selling. I was like, don't do that. Go through your survey. Make sure that the concrete render that's on the outside, let's get it off, put your line render on, and let's make sure that, because it's a lovely home, just make sure that your big ticket items are done, so that once you get to the conveyor, because the house will sell itself, it's great. So once you get to the legal process and you've got the surveyors coming in, you haven't got stuff that's problematic. And then you can actually have a smooth process rather than something that's elongated in how long it takes.
So surveys, I think just get the timing of the survey is key. And the other one I was going to mention is just the timing of getting your insurance lined up. I mean, from a legal perspective, the point here is that the risk of the property burning down, flooding, or an earthquake taking it down, that risk passes to a buyer, not at the point they get the keys, but at the point that exchange of contracts.
I think some people think it's completion, don't they?
Yeah, I mean, it would be an easy mistake to make, but the default position is that happens from exchange. So it's absolutely vital that a buyer has a robust, appropriate insurance policy in place from the date of exchange. And it may well be for a simple home that you can do that, there and then. And it's a fairly simple matter to go and get a quote and then put that on risk. But very often there are complicating factors for properties, particularly some of the ones that we deal with down here. It might be that the property's thatched or listed or non-standard construction. Or there may be a heightened flood risk affecting the property, lots of trees in the garden, all of
farmland,
these things,
that sort of thing, isn't it? Yeah.
All of these things will take it outside of the sort of normal standard insurance terms, and you'll need a bespoke policy. And the insurance companies often need to send someone out to go and assess and survey.
And you can't just do that the day before you're due to exchange.
No. I mean, these things can take weeks, and you can't be pressurised into taking whatever, because some of these policies can be very expensive for more complicated properties, and you want to be happy with the premium and the terms. So we always advise on those kind of properties that buyers start looking at insurance at the earliest opportunity.
So we've gone through pitfalls, why proactive conveyance is important, key legal mistakes that buyers make. What steps can buyers and sellers make to fast track the transaction? We've sort of gone into this, haven't we? But I think one thing that I see as well is, I think you said earlier, is engaging your solicitor at the right time. But then also it's making sure you got your forms filled in. You know what you're taking with you. You know what you're leaving. So that it's not then this. I had one once fall through where it was a £1.1 million barn conversion. and the seller hadn't thought about her big American fridge freezer. And that was the reason. There was lots of other reasons, but the tipping point was that on her property information form, she'd put that she wanted £1,000 for her fridge freezer. And the buyer was like, I'm paying top whack. Yeah. I'm not doing that. Yeah. Get it done up front. So we as agents want to know as well, because then we know what we're selling.
Yeah.
But get your forms done.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
Things like light fittings, I always get that, that light fitting's from Nakuku and it cost £1,000. Well, say that up front. If you're taking it with you, at least we know about it.
Yeah.
Because otherwise the buyer's going to come back and they're going to say to you as their solicitor, well, Josh, but we made our offer based on that light. And then it's just not work.
It all fell through.
Yeah.
A cuckoo light fitting. Yeah, I mean, let it not be so. I mean, there's no reason why you can't apply thought to filling out all of those forms early on. And
there's extensive paperwork. I think a lot of people forget that.
Yeah.
There is a lot that you need to do in selling your home.
I mean, if you were selling a car, there'd be a lot of paperwork. But I mean, how much more times is your house worth than your car? There's a lot of paperwork. If you can be really proactive in responding to your solicitor's requests for their own paperwork, monies on account, ID, source of funds information, that sort of stuff, as quickly as you can, that's helpful. Filling out these forms, getting together the planning documents, any discharges of planning conditions, building regs approvals and sign-offs. Listed building consents is crucial for listed buildings. And then servicing of key installations
boilers,
in the
electricals,
house, always boilers. I don't know what you recommend in terms of electrics.
Electrical is not a legal obligation of a seller, is it?
No.
But I often think for the cost of what the certificates are, they last 5 years.
Yeah.
It's probably worth you doing.
I mean, I suppose the only caveat to that is that if it brings up remedial work, you need to take that on the chin and expect to have to do that.
Indeed. But your surveyor's probably going to pull up on that anyway. So that's the thing, isn't it? Is if you've got, let's say you've got an electrical system that you know shot, or like you've got problems of, that switch takes 3 times to put on. Yeah. You know there's a problem there. So if you've got the report, us as agents like it. I can deal with whatever you've got that's the problem. If we know about it, that's fine. It's like with tanks.
Yeah.
If we know up front what the issues are, if I can say to someone, by the way, they've had an electrical safety certificate done. It's not passed because of this, this, and this. Please take that into account in your offer. That's okay, because then when it comes to you and it's on the memorandum of sale, buyer is aware that the electrics need replacing and it needs to be rewired. It's been taken into account with the price that's being paid. Fine, you can deal with that. I can deal with it. The surveyor can also deal with it, because
I mean, that's great. Most agents don't put that stuff on the memorandum, but that's really helpful when it's there, because you can everyone can point back to it in 2 months' time and say, hold on, that's been taken.
That's been dealt with. In my view, at the moment, especially with us as agents, there is more kind of compliance that we have to do. Not everyone does do it, but the easiest way to sell a house is when you're informed. Yeah. So give all the information, because your buyer's going to find it out eventually. That's what I always say to a seller is, all of the stuff that you're trying to hide, it's the surveyor's job to find it. Yeah. It's the solicitor's job to find it. So it's going to get found out at some point. Let's not foot £5,000, £10,000 of cost to then just fall through.
Yeah. And let's keep the trust in the process. Let's make it a collaborative enterprise rather than a contentious thing. It doesn't have to be that way.
No. Because I think I think the stat is about 1 in 3 property sales in the UK fall through, isn't it? And it doesn't need to be that high.
No.
If most people are informed at the start of a process, you wouldn't they like the house. They're in that process because they like it and they want to buy it. Yeah, if they knew all the problems at the start, they might still buy that house. They might buy it for £30,000 less, but they might still say, I'm happy with that. I'll take it on the chin.
Yeah.
Don't worry about it. Or they wouldn't buy it in the first instance, and then you haven't wasted £10,000 on your whole on your whole process.
Yeah. So get those installations serviced. Also, get the wood burner.
Yes, that's one thing a lot of people forget is a wood burner. Yeah.
Oil tanks.
Yes.
You can get them checked. And anything else that there may be, just worth getting for the whiter than white approach. Get that sorted ahead of time.
Yeah.
And then in terms of fast tracking the process, I mean, what I would say, John, is that there is nothing legally preventing a sort of same day transaction in this country, contrary to popular opinion. I've never done a same-day transaction where it's been, offer accepted and we're able to.
Do you know what your fastest transaction has been?
I've done some large transactions in less than 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And the key thing there, acting on the seller's side, is getting the searches done by the seller and then recouping the costs down the line from the buyer under the contract, so that the buyer, their solicitor, has that as part of the contract pack on day one. And obviously having a full contract pack ready to go as soon as an offer is accepted. So you're out of the starting blocks
and off you go.
Once the memorandum comes through. And then it's in the buyer's solicitor's hands to kind of keep to a time frame that needs to be very clearly communicated to by an agent. And everyone needs to be marching to the beat of the same drum.
Singing on the same hymn sheet,
But it is possible to do that. I mean, clearly has to be a cash buyer, because otherwise you'll be waiting for valuations, mortgage funds to be released, that sort of thing. And also cash buyers are free to take a view on things. So they're more nimble, as it were. So there are things that can be done, but you really need the right team around you to drive that transaction forward.
And I think I don't think everyone necessarily thinks about it, but at the higher end of the market, I have seen more of it, especially recently, with sellers getting the searches and then presenting that. I was talking to a client the other day. He's got a lovely home down in Cornwall that we're going to launch in the summer. And he said, okay, well, if we're going to do a launch event, we're going to make sure that for the launch event, we're going to invite everyone over, but we're going to have ready in advance so that all the buying agents that come along, they know that we've got contract packs there.
Brilliant.
Everything's done. He's going to get a survey done in advance. I know that the survey then can't pass a liability, but at least a buyer can then see there aren't any issues.
For information.
Purposes. There is everything almost like an auction.
Yeah.
There is everything you could possibly want on the house.
Auction.
Yeah, exactly. Off you go. There's 2 weeks to exchange contracts.
Yeah. It can absolutely be
definitely be done. And the exchange is the key part. The completion can be whenever. You've got your home that you want. So I think my best is 9 days. That we did, but that was one that had fallen through before. A buyer then came back in, and then you got searches survey. Surveyor went back round just to check it hadn't fallen down in the interim, and then was able to just rewrite a very simple report. Off you go, done. But they set completion for 3 months after. So they just wanted to buy it.
Sting had been taken out of exchange. I mean, intense 9 days, I imagine, but at least you're condensing that stress to a very short period.
He actually. Obviously, the solicitor that had acted on the previous sale had a lot of the answers ready. So, okay, that's been done. Buyer said to his sister, he was a cash buyer again. He's like, I'm going to take a view on most things, get the answers. I'll take a view. It's fine. As you say, it's getting it up front, isn't it? And then we've got probably the final little bit, legal myths. I think this is an interesting one. We'll finish on legal myths. What would you say are the legal myths? So, have you got any that surround property transactions?
There's some that maybe I can help to demystify. I mean, septic tanks are illegal is a myth. It is a myth that septic tanks are illegal. They are still legal, but need to be compliant. And they obviously can no longer discharge directly into a watercourse. Or to have to go via a drainage field.
Even though people have said, well, mine's fine. It's been doing this for years.
Well, so septic tanks are not necessarily illegal. I mean, a classic is thinking that your red line edging on your title plan is your boundary. I mean, the land registry recently came back to me just to remind me that that is not your true legal boundary position. The red line edging on your title plan only shows your general boundary. And there's sort of a margin of error. The true legal boundary is determined by a very complicated assessment of the physical boundary features and the pre-registration deeds. So if you want to find out the true legal position of your boundary that you can actually rely upon, you'd need to do what's called a boundary determination procedure. But suffice to say that you can't absolutely rely on your red line edging on the title plan as saying that is my boundary.
Well, especially not the red line on some title plans that we see that are from however many years ago and drawn with a felt tip pen, aren't they? So there's definitely a margin of legal error there. I think that's probably a good one to end on. So that's it for this episode. I hope you found it useful and tune in for another one.
Brilliant.
Thank you.
Thanks.